What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Yesterday, during the Overwatch dev livestream, the biggest announcement by far was that in Overwatch 2, the game would be moving from 6v6 to 5 versus 5. Some people don't like this, other people think that it's a great idea. Today, I'm going to break down the good parts of this and the bad parts of this. The first thing that I want to point out is that Overwatch has always been kind of largely unique for having 6 players. And it would have made sense if the game started out with role queue when you had 2-2-2, but that wasn't the case. When the game first came out in Overwatch, you could do whatever. You could have 5 Winstons and a Lucio. You could have 6 Divas defending second point on Hanamura. You could do whatever you want. So having 6 players was kind of weird because every other team-based game had 5v5. Dota, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Paladin, Smite, everything else, plus more, 5v5. And I've been playing Counter-Strike and Dota since they were mods for other games. And this channel wasn't always an Overwatch channel. Prior to Overwatch, I had been playing CSGO and making CSGO content for about a year prior to Overwatch getting released. So moving into suddenly 6v6 for no apparent reason seemed kind of weird. Doesn't mean that it was necessarily a bad change to have 6 players. It was just weird because I know myself and lots of other players were all asking the same question. Why is Blizzard having 6-player teams for Overwatch when the competitive standard for all team-based games is 5v5? Alright, so let's have a look at how moving to 5v5 is going to change the game. First, with the tank role, it really shouldn't even be called the tank role anymore because we're not going to have the main tanks, off tanks, and bruisers. Now, when we move into Overwatch 2, we're pretty much only going to have bruisers. Like, that's it. There's the idea of main tank, off tank is just gone, because you only have one, and they need to be more DPS focused. So you can't have a tank in Overwatch 2 that just plays kind of defensively and protects the team. That isn't really going to work. Even characters like Reinhardt and Orisa are now going to be more offense related. They're going to be more focused on getting in with the enemy team and dealing damage, as opposed to just kind of sitting around and trying to protect your team. So all of the characters in the tank role are going to be more bruisers than anything else. And really, they should just rename the role, whether it's bruisers, brawlers, whatever they want to call it. But they're functionally not going to be tanks anymore because they're not really going to specialize in protecting their team. So that's first and foremost. But that also means that you need to change the play style for all of these characters. Like, again, you can't just sit back with your shield up anymore, and you can't rely on someone else to help you. Like, you can't have that Rein-Zarya combo where you can rely on the bubble, or you can't have any other combo with Orisa Roadhog where you have the halt that gets thrown into the air and then you use the hook to combo it. And all of these synergies are just now gone, and now you need to be able to play just the one character on your own. And that means that it's going to have a pretty big change in the play style for all of these characters. Not being able to rely on a second character in the tank role to help you is a really, really big change. This is kind of a double-edged situation. On the one hand, you'll have existing tank players who are not going to like the change, but on the other hand, you might have some DPS players who now find that new bruiser style of play a little more appealing, and they may be more inclined to actually play and enjoy the new bruiser role. For the purposes of simplicity in this video, I'm going to refer to the Overwatch 2 role as just being bruiser, and the Overwatch 1 roles as being tanks. So that way, when I talk about a tank, you know I'm referring to Overwatch 1, and when I say bruiser, I'm referring to Overwatch 2, just to try to keep it a little simple. Another thing to consider is that bruiser is now way more valuable than the tanks that we used to have. Because previously, you could lose one of the 2 tanks and it wouldn't really be that bad. I mean, yeah, you would be at a little bit of a disadvantage, but you still had one and you were good. But now, if you lose your only bruiser, your team is going to be at a significant disadvantage. This means that whoever is playing the bruiser has a lot more stress on that player, and it's going to be a lot more important that that player doesn't make any mistakes, because you don't really have any fallback for that, right? You are the only person in that role. You have a pretty significant requirement that you need to fulfill for your team, and if you mess up, then you're done, right? Because DPS, you can have one bad DPS and you can still win as long as the other guy is doing his job. And for support, you can have one bad support as long as the other one is doing their job. But now you have just the one bruiser. And that is going to be a situation that a lot of people don't want to be in. They don't want to have all that kind of requirements and all that stress and all the expectations on that one player where if they mess up, then your team loses, right? Like, they don't want that kind of feeling. They don't want to be put in that situation. They want more of a little casual kind of experience. So they're not going to want to play just that one bruiser character. So what is this going to do for queue times and waiting for a match to start? Overall, I think it's going to decrease queue times. I think everybody's going to get into matches a little bit faster, simply because there are 2 less players that you need to find. And not only that, not only is it 2 less players, but it's 2 in the role that very few people want to play. So it's going to make it so that matches will start up faster and you'll have to wait less in queue, regardless of what role you're queuing for. Whether it's the bruiser, DPS, or support, doesn't matter. You're still going to have a lower queue time. However, having said that, I think that there is still going to be a weird situation where there's a lower queue time, but there's actually going to be less people that want to play bruiser. Because you're going to have existing tank players that just simply do not want to play the new bruiser role, and they're going to either play DPS, support, or they're just not going to play the game at all, or they're going to play the game less. Or you're also going to have some DPS players that will now want to play the bruiser role because it's basically a fat DPS. But I think overall you're going to end up losing people from that tank bruiser role situation. Like, you're going to have less people that want to play in that role overall, but you're still going to get a lower queue time simply because you only need to find one of them. One of the things that I think a lot of people will agree is definitely a good thing is that we can no longer have some of the troublesome tank comps like double barrier. Nobody likes shooting at a barrier for the entire match. It's slow, it's dumb, it's not fun. Double barrier is just a frustrating situation and people don't like it. And I think having that go away because it's simply not possible when you only have the one bruiser now is going to be overwhelmingly considered a good thing. Whether you like 5v5 or not, the idea that double barrier is no longer possible is still going to be a plus. And this also means that you're going to have new characters that get added to the game that are going to potentially have a barrier, because previously, if you had a new character that got added to the game with a barrier, well, then you would have to think, okay, so is you going to play this new character with Orisa and you're going to have double barrier again, or maybe you're going to have it with Sigma or Reinhardt in this one or whatever. So there were lots of different possibilities that would just make it frustrating to add a new tank character with a barrier. But now that they're just bruisers and you can only have one of them, then it doesn't matter. You can have a new character with a barrier and it's not going to just completely wreck the game. Having said that, even when they change all the characters in the tank role over to bruisers, there is still going to be one tank hidden in the game in the DPS role. And no, I'm not talking about Bastion in his ult form, I'm talking about Mei. Everything about Mei and her kit is functionally a tank. She just has a little bit less health than the other tanks do. She has probably better self-protection abilities in the Ice Block and the Self-Heal than some of the other characters. I mean, it's a better ability than what Roadhog has for his Take a Breather, because she can heal herself up to full, it refills her ammo, and it makes her completely immune to all damage. It's better than what Roadhog has for his Self-Heal. She also has the Ice Wall, which is great for protecting your teammates, cutting off enemies from escaping, or just, separating an enemy team, and that is going to be even better than what some of the other things can do for the other tanks. I mean, she just has functionally a tank kit on a character that is still in the DPS. We've already seen this situation happen where Goat's comp was no longer possible because of the 2-2-2 role queue system. We then had Orisa and Roadhog in the tank role, and then we had Mei being used functionally as a third tank. Yeah, she has less health, but it doesn't matter. Her abilities are still amazing and function as a tank, and we saw her being used as a tank. Well, now into Overwatch 2, it's 5v5, you now have the one bruiser. Guess what Mei becomes again? She can be used as an off-tank to support your bruiser. So you have a Reinhardt or something who maybe is in a little bit of danger, you can use the wall to protect him. You can use the wall more aggressively, like if the enemy team has a Zarya or a Reinhardt or something who's moving forward, you can then put the wall right behind them to separate that one bruiser from the rest of their team. And remember that one bruiser is now way, way, way more important than the tanks were from Overwatch 1, because you only have the one of them. So now you can use that even more effectively, and it puts even more of hurting on the enemy team and puts them even more of a disadvantage because they only have the one bruiser. So Mei now becomes even better at being an off tank in the 5v5 situation. And while it is true that they removed the freeze function from her primary attack, it doesn't matter. The rest of her kit is what makes her a tank. Also, keep in mind that because Mei is going to be in the DPS role, she will now have that passive role buff that all DPS are going to get, which is the movement speed buff. So you're going to have a Mei who is functionally working like a tank, able to move faster than most of the other characters in the game. And she's going to be able to just run up on people and freeze them, or use the wall to cut off their escape and separate the enemy team and all that sort of stuff. So she's going to be an off tank, and she's going to be, even without the freeze that she currently has, Mei will be a better off tank because of the movement speed increase in Overwatch 2. The fact of the matter is, Mei is going to need more changes. You simply cannot leave her as a de facto speedy off tank in the DPS role, because if they do, it's just going to cause problems. Okay, let's talk about some of the other impacts of the 5v5 change. Is it going to make the game faster paced? I think for the most part, yes, because you're going to have less barriers, less protective and defensive abilities. More emphasis is going to be placed on traditional FPS mechanics like, hitting your enemy. So I think that the game overall is going to become more fast-paced, although you are going to have some teams that are going to be really careful because you only have the one bruiser now, and they're going to be a little more timid. You're going to run into those Reinhardts who have a broken W key and just don't know how to walk forward. There are going to be those situations, but I think for the most part, you're going to see some much faster gameplay throughout. And this means that characters like Zenyatta are going to be a lot more impactful. Widowmaker, Hanzo, anyone with a long-range hit scan is also going to be super powerful as well. And even if there's fall-off damage to it, it's still going to be very impactful because, again, there aren't going to be barriers in the way. So even if you're doing less damage at long range, like an Ashe or a McCree or a Soldier or something, it's still going to be more kind of the traditional FPS. And without all the barriers and protective abilities and stuff in the way, they're going to be more effective as a character, which might cause some problems for some of the projectile characters. I don't know, we'll have to see how that gets balanced out. But overall, I do think that the game is going to become more fast-paced, which I know a lot of people don't care about the Overwatch League, but it might make the games more exciting if you're into that sort of thing. What about ultimate abilities? This is actually kind of weird, because even though the game overall will become more fast-paced, the amount of ultimate abilities that get used is probably going to go down, and the reason for that is because there are a lot less barriers and protective abilities and defensive abilities and stuff. So that means that fights are probably going to be over a lot faster than they were before. Like, the total fight time is going to be decreased from what we currently have. But on top of that, remember that there's only one enemy tank now, or one enemy bruiser, so you're going to have one less thing to hit. And on top of that, you have the new role passive for the tanks, the bruisers, which is that they give less ultimate charge when hit. So if you hit an enemy McCree, you're going to get more ult charge than if you hit the enemy Reinhardt. Now, what this means is that overall, all of the bruisers and the DPS are going to have a slower charge for their ultimates, and because you only have the one bruiser, you're also going to see a slower charge for your supports as well, because they only have, technically four people to heal instead of themselves for the most part, but you're going to have less people to heal. Like, normally, you would have two really high health characters. You would have a Reinhardt and a Zarya, and you could heal both of them and build your ult charge, or you have Orisa and a Roadhog, and you could build your ult charge pretty fast. But now if you only have the one, and that one isn't really taking, super huge amounts of damage, then you're going to see slower ult charge. So even though the game overall is going to have a faster pace, we're probably going to end up seeing less use of ultimate abilities, which I don't really know if I like that. See, here's the thing. I would prefer, and I've been saying this for a long time, I would prefer if we had ultimate abilities that were closer to normal abilities. I would rather have an ultimate be used more frequently and be less powerful. I don't like the idea of having this one ability that basically wins the entire team fight and allows you to capture the point. I think that's kind of dumb, because you're just saving up until you can press Q, and then your team wins and you take the point. I don't like that. I would rather have ultimates that are less powerful and used more frequently. But unfortunately, it seems like Overwatch 2 is going to be going in the opposite direction. Now, it is entirely possible that they could simply lower the ultimate requirement, the charge requirement, for all characters across the board. Or they could just kind of make some other changes or something like that that would allow players to have kind of a comparable amount of ultimate uses as they do right now. But like I said, I would rather have it be less powerful and used more frequently than more powerful, just, press Q to win the team fight. With the game moving to a faster pace, it means that stationary comps and stationary characters are going to be even worse. You might think that a character like Bastion is suddenly going to become powerful because the enemy team doesn't have a lot of barriers or other defensive abilities, but the fact is that Bastion is going to be even worse than ever before, because even though the enemy team doesn't have barriers, it means that your team doesn't have barriers either. You're not going to have all of the defensive stuff required to make a Bastion work. And that means that they're going to be able to very easily destroy that Bastion character, especially the other DPS who are now going to have increased movement speed. This means that characters are going to be able to flank around to the sides and behind Bastion much, much easier than ever before with that increased movement speed. And it doesn't help Bastion, because even though he's a DPS and he technically has more movement speed, he's still going to be sitting in one spot. And yes, a good Bastion player is going to try to move around quite a bit, but that's not going to help. The fact of the matter is that Bastion, in his current form, is always going to be best when he is stationary, when he is sitting in one spot in that sentry mode, and that means he's going to be way, way easier to destroy. Bastion and other stationary type characters are going to be really bad. Now, for Torbjorn, this is kind of mixed, because if you treat the turret just as being something disposable, then it's not really going to be that big of a deal. In fact, it might help, because it'll allow Torbjorn, with his increased movement speed, to get into a position, throw out the turret, use that as a flanking thing, and then you can attack from a different angle. So you'll be able to better position that turret, and even if it gets destroyed, who cares? It's if you're trying to treat that turret like it's some super precious object and you need to protect it forever, then you're going to run into some situation. I mean, you should be doing that anyways, even in the current game. But if you're using the turret just to run out there, toss it out, and then to attack from a different angle, that might actually be better. Granted, Torbjorn still probably isn't going to be a very good character, but I don't think he's going to have quite the same issues that Bastion is. Another impact we can expect from the 5v5 change is that the bursty, high damage type attacks and abilities are going to be less important. Granted, they're still going to be very good, but currently, low consistent type damage is not very good because you have all the barriers and everything else that get in the way, and what ends up happening is you do a little bit of damage, but then they can just hide behind a barrier or some other defensive ability, and what happens is that player just gets healed back up to full, which is kind of what slows down the pace of the game. But since that doesn't happen anymore in the 5v5 situation, or it's going to happen less, what's going to happen is that, yes, you can still get healed, but it means that the lower consistent damage type attacks and abilities are going to be more useful simply because you're not going to have all of those kind of defensive measures in the way, where it's going to add up, and now when it adds up, it's actually going to matter, and you'll get eliminations from it, as opposed to just having it be almost kind of useless damage that gets healed up, and it's just a back and forth kind of ult charge situation between you and the enemy healer. Another impact of all of this is going to put more emphasis on individual player performance. As I said before, it takes 6 people to win a match and only 1 to lose, but in Overwatch 2, with a 5v5 system, and only having the 1 bruiser and a lot less barriers and other defensive stuff in the way, you're going to be able to actually do more as a DPS, or even as the support, or as that 1 bruiser, particularly that 1 bruiser. You're going to have a lot of impact. Now, again, some people don't want to have that kind of responsibility, they don't want that pressure, but others are not going to care. Like, I wouldn't care if I have all that pressure on me to just be the 1 bruiser. I'm fine with that. But I can understand some people are not going to want to have that. But the fact still remains that individual player performance is going to be a lot more important in the 5v5 situation, where even if you have just 1 person on your team that's not really doing what they need to do, you can still kind of shine through. Now, this is going to be a little less of the case if that 1 person is going to be the bruiser. If that 1 bruiser is just not doing their job, then it's certainly going to make it more difficult. But if you have someone on your team, a DPS, who is just doing absolutely amazing, then you're going to actually be able to start carrying now, because you're not going to have to worry about having two barriers in the way. If you're a really good DPS, you can get into the backline, you can take out their supports, you can take out their DPS, and then the rest of your team can finish off their bruiser. It doesn't matter if your bruiser is like spinning in circles in the spawn room, you're still going to be able to have a much bigger impact. And I think that that is definitely really good. I know that a lot of emphasis originally with Overwatch was it's a team game and everybody needs to work together. No, that's dumb, right? Like, I don't want to have to rely on my team in order to win. I want to be able to perform, and I want to be able to do my best and actually win the match for my team. Like, not that I'm doing it by myself, to be sure, but I don't want my performance and I don't want everything that I'm doing to just kind of be watered down and you know, diluted because some of the other people on my team are not doing what they're supposed to do. I want to be able to have a genuine kind of significant impact and a noticeable impact on what is going on. I don't want everything to just kind of blend together. So in that regard, I think 5v5 is going to be far superior than 6v6 when it comes to the individual player performance and impact. So there are going to be a lot of changes with 5v5. Some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad. A lot of it just comes down to personal preference, whether or not you like the new play style of the bruiser, whether or not you like to have the added pressure of being the only bruiser on your team. That's not really any kind of objective thing. That's your personal preference, whether you like it or not. Some are going to like it, some are not going to like it, some might stick with the game, and some might not. What do you guys think about the 5v5 change? What do you think are the good things and the bad things? Let me know down below. A big thanks to all the Paragons and other channel members for all your support. If you'd like to become one and grab some cool rewards, click the join button down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like before you leave. And remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault.